Coast Combat Hour. Ed Carvajal, as always, with Matthew Hawkins, screwing around on the internet, talking about. Well, I mean, lots going on in the combat sports world. I guess we should talk about Matt the biggest news that's kicked off the week. Ben Askren's retirement. I don't know. What's your take? Like what was your reaction when you heard the news or read it?
I was a little surprised just because I figured most guys like to retire on a win, but you get sucked into that where you get a win and then you feel like you're back and then you eventually get a loss and another loss and another loss and another loss and it never seems to end well. So, I mean, it is what it is. I feel like Askren did what he said he wanted to do. I mean, obviously he didn't win a world championship, but he came in and he competed against some of the top guys. I mean, he fought two of the best, you know, violent brawlers, basically, essentially in Masvidal and Lawler, and then he tested himself against the arguably the greatest grappler, especially at submission grappler at 170 pounds. So it didn't go his way. He was in two of the three fights. I mean, obviously, he won one versus Lawler. The Masvidal fight, I always chalk up a little bit to fluke's not the right word, but obviously, if they rematched, I don't think we'd see a 5 second knockout. So um, that always will be left up to fans to figure out how that would have played out. But
Yeah.
he made money. He became kind of famous, and I'm sure he'll be able to do kind of whatever he wants to do now outside of the MMA. Outside of fighting, he can be involved in MMA in really any aspect he wants. I think.
Yeah, no, he's got he started doing that thing with Rufkin, which is like the Martin Florani's new streaming video like content creation platform baby. He's definitely got a following with in the crypto space because he's a cryptocurrency enthusiast. We actually had the folks on this podcast from the Litecoin Foundation. They talked about how he's involved with them. Obviously he does stuff for wrestling or whatever. Anything physical, he's just going to be out of commission for because he's going to have that hip surgery. What's funny is when I saw that was the reason for him choosing to retire. He talked about hip replacement surgery, and we had Jake Smith on the podcast not so long ago, and just before we started recording tonight, he tweeted like so many people retiring because they're opting because they need to get the hip replacement surgery. And I actually thought about that interview we did with him because he said, if you remember when he was on, he was like, that could have ended my career. So he decided to, do alternative options to relieve the pain or whatever they're dealing with when you need a hip replacement surgery. So it looks like that's what Ben Askren did for as long as he could. I mean, and not he didn't do too bad in my opinion. I mean, he got the title at one. I mean, he when he was in his prime, he was he was a Bellator champion. He's got wins over Koreshkov and Lima. Um, so what's that saying from Rocky whatever movie or Creed or one of those? Time is undefeated. So it's one of
Yeah,
those things.
he falls victim to the UFC propaganda machine, and unfortunately, it was really built up behind him or against him for the vast majority of his career. So you got a lot of fans who've never once watched a Bellator or never once watched a one fighting championship, who've never once watched anything outside of a random Saturday night UFC event.
Yeah.
That feel like they can judge him on his career based off his last three fights, and um, we've talked about it before. I mean, that's kind of the worst thing I guess about MMA fans is we're not our sport is spread out and there's other fights and other fighters and other organizations that take place and you have to look some of that stuff out. It's not like the NFL or the NBA where essentially you can tune in on any given day for that or for that organization or sporting organization and see the best athletes in the world. I mean, there's obviously some great baseball players in Japan. Football's pretty much into the NFL. There's not really much outside that. Um, but and basketball's got some international guys out there that are really good playing in Europe and in China and so forth. But most of those guys eventually end up coming to the NBA earlier in their career, and they're not David's. The commissioners of those baseball and NBA aren't out there bashing. Uh, they weren't bashing Yao Ming in China before he came to the NBA. They were praising him and wanting him to come to the NBA. Ichiro Suzuki for baseball. I mean, international stars that were making a name for themselves overseas, and then it was always wanting them to come play in the major leagues or NBA. And whereas unfortunately, you had Dana White for basically close to a decade who was disparaging Ben Askren. Apparently, they worked through most of that stuff, obviously, to bring him in, but
Mm.
a lot of damage was done. I feel like with the Twitter world, we'll say, and the quick flash news media who just takes quotes and um, I'm a fan of the UFC. I don't. I like what Dana White has done in a lot of cases. We've obviously had some stuff where we don't like, but there's some fans out there that take his word as gospel, and he's no different than like a Don King or anybody like that when it comes to promoting. You're listening to a guy who you're giving money to, and he wants you to believe what he says. And unfortunately, a lot of people, without doing any research on their own, believe what they hear, and that goes beyond just sports. That's where we're at, kind of as a population right now. You see a headline, and that's what you live by.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, it's definitely the power of the internet and social media and the loudest and richest figureheads out there will definitely lead folks to follow something or another. But I mean that's where it is. I mean, what good luck to him in his retirement and stuff like that. I mean, I actually I think you saw it too. I put a comp even ESPN in their retirement post when they were market pushing out that interview, they used the image of him getting knocked out by Jorge Masvidal, which was kind of fucked up in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
that's what I'm talking about. Like,
yeah,
none of these other, you would never take, when Tom Brady retires from football, they're not going to show a picture of him laying in agony when,
yeah,
in the one year he had his knee blown out in the first
yeah,
game of the year. I mean, that's not going to be the photo they decide to use. They're not, when Kobe Bryant retired, they didn't show him laying on the ground with a torn Achilles tendon.
yeah,
That kind of stuff is special, I guess, for MMA. Um, Even I don't think you would see it in boxing. Uh,
no,
you're not going to see
yeah,
that. So it just kind of shows where we're at,
yeah. Well,
and
I
a
mean, so
bias, I guess.
yeah, well, yeah, that's why. So what I was saying was, I reshared it actually. One championship put out a really positive video that showed all the highlights of his wins and the camaraderie he had with his not camaraderie, the respect he had with his opponents and stuff. So I shared that today too. I mean, they put that out the day after the announcement. It was out this morning, so it's up on their social media feed, and I shared it too. So, um, it is what it is. But speaking of other promotions and and championships and stuff like that, so Kyoji. Funny thing is, when we record this, it's been happening a lot lately. I don't know if you've noticed. The following morning, I usually share a lot of like RIZIN announcements because I get the press releases in the middle of the night. So of course, the one I get after we recorded last week is that Kyoji Horiguchi tore his ACL, had surgery, and he's going to be out 10 months for recovery. It looks like he's relinquished his RIZIN belt. So that who knows? They said they're going to say how they're going to handle that soon, which I would imagine would be this week, given that their card that they were supposed to be on is the end of next month. But Bellator, I haven't seen any response from them what they're going to do for the Bantamweight Championship. So I wrote a piece at MMAnews.com. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but my proposal was, and this is where your encyclopedic memory needs to step in. But like, I don't. They've done so. They've been so. They've come so hard with the Grand Prix and the tournament stuff. They didn't do a 135 one yet, did they?
No,
So that's
no.
my solution to, that's what I think they should do to resolve it on their end. have a tournament, and either have Kyoji defend when he's good enough, because these Grand Prix seem to last a year. So if he's good enough to come back and defend at the end of the year, either that or just have them fight to be the new champion.
I don't disagree with that idea. The only thing, and I didn't really notice it until right before the show. Some quick research pulling it up here. Bellator doesn't have a lot of bantamweights listed on their under contract. Um, I think a lot of the bantamweights bounce between 135 and 145. An example is this tournament right now we got going at featherweight.
Hmm.
Some of the top bantamweights, Caldwell and Dantes, are the two that jump out at me, and obviously
Yeah,
they're still involved in the 145-pound tournament. So that makes things a little bit complicated. They got James Gallagher. A couple names that really jump out at me. Patrick Mix. He's
yeah.
obviously right there, but he's got a fight lined up. I believe it's is it in Riz? I don't remember if it's in
He's on the Japan.
Ryzen or is he
Yeah,
on? You know,
he's
but
on the Friday, or the not the New Year's Eve one, the one before that.
so he's fighting on the Bellator card
Yeah, yeah.
in Japan. So if he pulls out a win in his fight, obviously he's right there. Um, like I said, Gallagher and there was another name that jumped out. Oh, Sergio Pettis.
Hmm.
Obviously, Pettis is the new free agent signing over there, and as well as Eric Perez, who comes over from Combate. So you have, I mean, I suppose if you just use those four names, maybe you could do a little four-man Grand Prix and get something going. Otherwise, I feel like Bellator's kind of bought a little bit of time, considering guys like Dantes and Caldwell are still alive in the 145-pound. Maybe you can let that unfold for the next 3 or 4, 5 months into almost into summertime, and let it kind of figure itself out. Even if you don't set up an official Grand Prix, you can set up. Obviously, they're going to have to give Pettis a good fight, and I think Caldwell fights. Does Caldwell? I believe his fight might be again in January against Boric. So
Oh yeah,
hypothetically, Caldwell could fall back down into the bantamweight class if he's eliminated from that tournament. If he loses that fight, now obviously you don't necessarily want to give him a title fight right off of a loss, but you could then at that point introduce a tournament or Grand Prix, something to set up. For the end of the year, because you don't really have to have a champion. Um, Especially if you just say you just your bracket is basically Horiguchi at the end. You get through an 8-man Grand Prix, which is going to take a year, and
hmm,
then come next, a year from this February, all of a sudden, then you got your title fight with Horiguchi versus the winner of the Grand Prix. So there's several ways to get around it, and the Grand Prix actually saves that. So that's a great idea. I don't know exactly where you would pull up. I don't think you could get 16 names like you did for the featherweights.
yeah.
It'd be a little tougher. I mean, you got Bandejas in there, but he's coming off a couple tougher fights.
I Yeah, no, yeah. I was actually gonna say Bandejas. I'm actually wondering what Caldwell's initial reaction to the news was himself, considering his history with Horiguchi, and how he felt after losing the title to him here in New York. Um, but yeah, I mean, we can't don't be surprised. Scott Coker, he will get old school on us and do some one night thing. He's done it before with the Dynamite events. A lot of people, I think, like outside of you and me, a lot of people weren't feeling those, but I mean, guys like you and I love stuff like that. I mean, just have a huge combat sports extravaganza. I talked to him about that like in October of last year, and if you see his face lights up, so I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls some craziness like that.
I mean, I know Horiguchi was supposed to fight Sakura, who had defeated him in a non-title fight. Maybe you get creative and figure, since Horiguchi was the RIZIN and the Bellator champ, maybe you just kind of unite that belt for like the next year. You
Hmm.
figure out if Asakura beats his opponent, whoever it turns out to be on New Year's, and then like say Mix wins on New Year's, maybe you do them fight each other, Asakura versus Mix, in like I don't know, a couple months later in either organization, but you do it for like the combined belt or for both belts.
Yeah,
And you just kind of roll with that. I mean, that buys you a couple more months again after a title fight. You can basically go every 6 months without too much noise coming up for a demand for a fight. So really, it's not impossible to get through this, but it's a shame for Horiguchi, man. I mean, there were some fights that were setting up. The other thing is if we've heard Pitbull, the double champ right now, has always said he wanted to be a triple champ. So all of a sudden,
It's a thing.
things start
Yeah,
things start becoming available.
yeah,
Depending on obviously how the featherweight tournament unfolds. Uh, maybe somehow he fits in a fight for the 135-pound belt, and all of a sudden you've got a triple champ in the featherweight tournament. So
yeah,
who the heck knows at this point?
yeah. It's definitely a thing, but we'll see. I mean, time will tell. I would hope that we hear from Bellator side soon, maybe this weekend in London or what have you. But I mean, I'm already segueing and what the next portion of what we're going to talk about is on the podcast. But maybe we'll hear something this weekend. But speaking of the weekend, I know you're going to be busy, you're going to be away, so hopefully you'll get to catch some stuff. But a lot of folks are huffing and puffing and talking about bias and everything that you were just talking about before. People are getting all butthurt that there's no UFC for three weights, but the UFC is not the entire sport of mixed martial arts. There's a lot of stuff going on otherwise, and the Bellator event is one of them. I mean, what do you, what's on your radar as far as like fights? I mean, like I know you're going to be busy, but you always you sneak something in on your phone or what have you. So, what do you got your eye on this weekend?
Yeah, it'll be a little tougher because where I'm going to visit family, there's not great internet, so I will be battling through it a little bit. Um, Combate is on Friday, and I'm not a huge. I don't always catch the Combate cards. I know you try to do your best on that. Trevor Wells, one of the instructors at Dan Henderson's gym, is competing in that, so I'm going to try to catch his fight. Um, so I believe that's Friday night, the 22nd, and then Saturday, the Bellator card. I'll try to probably catch the MVP fight. It's not. It's a European card. Leon
Yeah,
Edwards. Um, is it? No, it's Fabian Edwards.
Fabian
I'm sorry,
Edwards. Yeah,
Fabian Edwards.
Mike Shipman.
Yeah, I'll likely try to catch. So I'll try to catch like the top two fights there. If nothing's going on, I'll work on watching more. Probably can pick that up on the app out there. But honestly, probably my main focus will be trying to catch the Wilder Ortiz fight, boxing match on Saturday night.
Is
Uh,
that a pay per view or is that some ESPN Plus nonsense? Or
no, it's a pay per view. From everything I see, it's a pay per view. So
so I might
uh,
be able to catch it at the bars around here.
yeah, I mean it's a rematch. Wilder beat Ortiz. Um, the first time they fought, Wilder is 41-0-1 with the draw against Fury, and Luis Ortiz is 31-1 with his only loss being to Wilder. So Ortiz is older. He's 40, so he's obviously kind of at the end of his career, but he's a big puncher. Uh, Had a great fight with Wilder the first time, so that'll be a fight I'll try to catch. I mean, it's a world championship heavyweight fight. Uh, and no disrespect to Bellator, but their London card doesn't do a whole lot for me. Like I said, there's no UFC, um, which I actually kind of like.
Yeah,
I'm going to the event on the 14th, UFC 245. So it gives me a couple weeks to kind of prepare for that and build up an excitement, which I kind of like.
yeah,
And there's no events in front of it that where a main event's going to cancel and they're going to pull a fight from the big pay per view coming up. So that don't hurt. That pay per view is December 14th, but there's that. But UFC, I mean, I think this past weekend we're not going to really go into it because it was kind of a lackluster card. Um,
yeah. The Sao Paulo event. Yeah,
Jan Blachowicz beat Jacare by decision in a pretty slow all stand up fight, not a lot of action. So, I mean, I think it just proves obviously it's always nice to have fights on, but I don't mind getting a chance to catch up and actually be able to focus on a boxing match
yeah,
or and kind of change it up a little bit. So, that's really what I'll be doing. I know there's a combat jiu-jitsu card. I believe that's on Sunday on Fight Pass. If I get back into town and get settled, I'll probably work to try to catch some of that.
yeah. I mean, that's late for me. I know we're on a time difference. That's why we call it Coast to Coast Combat Hour. I'm 3 hours ahead of you, so that'll probably be later for me, the combat jiu-jitsu. But I mean, Friday, anybody that is subscribed to UFC Fight Pass, CFFC is on Friday night. LFA 79 is Friday night. I think that might be their last card for the year on Fight Pass, and then they go back to their regular Friday night schedule on Fight Pass. And but yeah, the Wilder Ortiz I think will be the focus of the weekend for a lot of folks. Again, I know you're hitting the road, and we're kind of experimenting with some new software here for this podcast. So hopefully this audio and video doesn't go to shit when we end. But what was I going to say to you? The one thing is, you said the 14th was 245, but the DC event is December 7th. That's the one we interviewed
December
Billy.
7th. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm thinking I'm closer to heading to Vegas than I am. So, yes, so the December 7th
yeah. We
card
spoke
is
with Billy for that. Billy
correct.
Campillo.
That's the
Yeah.
weekend before. So that's my bad. So there is a potential for stealing some fights from the from the
Yeah.
pay-per-view, but hopefully not. That DC card is actually pretty loaded with some
Yeah.
quality names. Um, one other quick thing of note from this past weekend, the
Mhm.
BKFC card, really kind of really a fun fight again
Oh
was the
yeah.
Lobov versus Knight. This
Yeah.
time Knight finished Lobov by KO or TKO. I mean, he dropped him, and Lobov didn't have an answer. Closed his eye, beat him up.
Yeah.
Knight fought a really good fight. Kind of the total opposite of the way he fought the first fight. The first fight was
He
like
might.
a firefight, and this one he used a lot of technique and didn't come out really. I didn't see any cuts or really any blood
Yeah.
on him.
No, he did. He did well, and the thing of it is that he called out Paulie Malignaggi too. I mean, obviously they're trying to do their next BKFC event, but he's actually willing to step into boxing to face Paulie Malignaggi. I wrote about it over at my MMA News this morning, because Malignaggi said that he wouldn't mind boxing Night, and not for nothing. After going through a weekend of freaking KSI and Paul Logan or Logan Paul, whatever the hell his name is. I mean, if they can main event on the zone, why not give these two real fighters a chance to, make some money off of something? I mean, I think both Paulie and Jason deserves. I know Paulie hates on MMA fans a lot, but it's because he gets a lot of hate. The guy, if you ever listen to his analyst work, he actually makes a lot of sense when he's not all fired up about Connor. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, you talk about that other fight, which I actually watched. Not real proud.
of
Not,
course you did.
of course I did. Uh, I, it it's just one of those things. I watch. I'd watch two rats fight if I put them in
If
a
you got
cage.
nothing better to do,
Yeah, and
and that was one of those weekends though, so I
you
can't
know,
fault you. Yeah,
but I mean, just a quick note on that. I mean, those guys went in there, they fought. It wasn't the greatest fight, obviously, but I don't like to. I've always been one of the persons who defend people who are willing to put the gloves on or
yeah,
step in the cage, and I don't begrudge anybody who's willing to make a shitload of money
yeah.
to do it.
uh,
And those guys somehow are famous. I have no idea where they come from. I
Me
didn't.
neither.
I have no reason to ever look it up. Apparently, they're YouTube stars, which I don't even know what that means. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, I guess
Ironically enough, because we put our asses on YouTube, but
yeah. But
yeah,
I mean, I guess you get millions and millions of people following you on YouTube. I don't know what they do, so I can't really comment on it.
yeah,
Uh, but good for them. I mean, I don't think you're gonna get Malignaggi. I think those guys made some astronomical amount of money to fight.
yeah.
Um,
That's what Eddie Hearn was saying. It's a numbers game, and he's actually predicting someone else will try to pull his, because since he pulled it off twice, he thinks people will try to jump on that bandwagon and make their money too. Which is why my argument is, okay, if you're gonna do it for these guys, that not every. I mean, I honestly don't know what they do either. I found out that Logan Paul was a YouTube guy, and I don't know what KSI is still, but not for nothing. I mean, we know Malignaggi's a world class boxer. Jason Knight's a fighter in MMA, and becoming a world class BK, bare knuckle, as bare knuckles rising through, in combat sports. Why that, to me, that's worth paying for. You know what I mean? I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. I would. I don't know how they would do it. I don't know if the zone can get involved, or if Feldman at bare knuckle wants to do a one off with gloves for Malignaggi's sake, so he doesn't break his hands. Because that was my concern with his Lobov fight. Was, if you see my interview with him for my MMA News leading up to that, that was one of my main questions I asked him. And I mean, the fact that he did it, I think a lot of people give him a lot of shit, but people should give him credit for doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best thing for BKFC would simply to just do an off fight and promote it
Mhm.
that this is just a boxing match. This is we got Malignaggi. He was willing to do this under our banner. It's not going to be bare knuckle. Maybe you can talk him down to some smaller gloves. Maybe you can do it with
Yeah,
MMA gloves. Maybe you can do
yeah,
it with like some 6 ounce gloves, boxing gloves, or something like Pride kind of used to do back in the day, where it was a little bit larger size glove, but not necessarily full on boxing. So I don't know. I don't know how serious Malignaggi is. It's hard to really know up until he talks a lot, so you don't really know if he's really willing to do this or not. I mean, his
Mhm.
reputation right now would not be good as if Jason Knight were to beat him. It would in a boxing match would certainly not be good for his long term reputation. Perhaps he doesn't care at this point. Perhaps it's just about money and still a slight urge to want to compete. But
Yeah.
um, I think that would be the best thing. I don't think I don't know. I don't know how else they would do it. I hear you on their names, but I don't think it's a huge money making pay per view as a standalone. I think
Mhm.
it would have to be as part of some kind of crazy fight
Mhm.
festival, or maybe BKFC does something off the thing where they have some MMA fights, some bare knuckle fights, a boxing match, a kickboxing match. I don't know. Maybe you can co promote with
Mhm.
somebody and
Yeah.
just kind of have like a weird event. I mean, they're bringing in this guy apparently like the Iranian Hulk dude who's like 400 pounds, and
Yeah.
I don't. I think it's Photoshop mostly. So I mean, they're going to bring him in. I see Tim Sylvia
So
online
he can have a
talking
heart
about.
attack in the ring.
Yeah, so maybe you just kind of turn it into a freak show thing. Maybe
Yeah.
you get a hold of KSW, you bring over Pudzilla and stuff like that. But I don't know.
All right.
I mean that's what you're really gonna have to do. I feel like, and I don't have a problem with that. As I say, I think it's funny the MMA people who tune in to watch KSI and Logan Paul or Logan's Run, whatever the hell his name is, and then complain about uh somebody fighting CM Punk fighting in UFC. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, it's like they're highbrow about it. It's like, dude, this is combat sports. You can't
Yeah.
take it seriously.
Yeah.
The first fight I ever saw was a 650-pound man getting slapped by Keith Hackney and beat down till with a club, with a club hand. I mean, this
Yeah.
is this is this is the sport that most of us grown to love. The people that, like I said, just tune in on Saturdays and watch the card, don't know half the names, remember two or three names, and then move on to the next Saturday and
Twist
catch
his
three
dick
fights.
off. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That kind of shit.
Yeah.
The kick his ass sea bass guys that I hear at every event. That kind
Yeah.
of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad they're there and I'm glad that they're supporting the sport, but it's it's fights. It's for money. It's prize fighting. It's
Yeah.
so yeah. If they can do it, anybody. If Malignaggi will fight, if Jason Knight works for great for him, let him get paid. I know Lobov's already uh, went after Johnny Bedford, or not went after, but challenged Johnny Bedford, who come off another win, who's 5-0 in BKFC, to a fight, and basically just, hey, let's make some money, let's feed our families, and let's put on a hell of a fight. So that's the kind of stuff that's great. And if Lobov has the power to help somebody like Johnny Bedford put an extra zero on the end of a paycheck and set up his family, then that's what this is all about. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, but that's kind of where we're at here. So
So yeah, I mean that pretty much closes us out for the week. So if you want to do the plugs for us, and I'll end
follow
this.
us at Twitter. I'm sorry, at Combat Hour on Twitter, at Coast to Coast at Combat Hour on Instagram, myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, at Carbeerzol on Instagram. Yeah, Ed, hopefully my flight takes off tomorrow. I avoid this crazy weather. I know you got some nonsense on your coast as well. So hopefully we both get through this and watch a little bit of bloodshed over the weekend.
All right, cool. Be, be safe, Pudzilla.
Yeah. All right.
Pudzilla.